Hey, everybody, welcome back to Early Childhood Chats podcast. Andy Roszak with you as always. And today we're really talking about an exciting topic. We're talking about AI, talking about new technology, all sorts of stuff that is allegedly going to make our life much easier. So I'm excited for that. My life could use some easing up, right? But today, joined by Jose Moreno. He has got a really interesting background, did a lot of work with some of the big tech organizations out there, and is the founder and CEO of New Light, which is a new product he's bringing to market to try to help us manage our data and manage our time a little bit more effectively. So, Jose, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about this a little bit more. I'm pretty excited about it.
So, I know I didn't do your background and your history justice. Can you please tell folks a little bit more about you, what you've been doing, what your expertise is, and what kind of brings you into this space?
Absolutely. Born and raised in LA, I'll start off there. And I went to Harvey Mudd College, graduated from there. And after that, I went into basically big tech companies. So I spent 5.5 years in Seattle working for Microsoft. That allowed me to start building some large scale products that serve 500 million users plus, and just a great overall learning experience. And then for the last, aside from this year, for the last 9.5 years, I was working at Netflix, which was just an amazing company to work for. I love the company, I love the product. And we're, I guess, in this new company taking a lot of the philosophies that I believe made Netflix successful. And so I'm pretty excited about that. And then of course we're starting up New Light, which is NEULIGHT. It's a combination of neural networks and enlightenment. Neural networks are basically what construct the AI models that are out there today. I think I was a little too clever with the name. It's hard to spell. But either way, we are the focus of New Light and what we're trying to do is build the next generation of ed tech software. Now, I know there's like some hesitancy with Silicon Valley people coming into education, thinking that they know all the answers to everything. I can say that that is not our approach. We're coming in very humbly. We know how to build software and we know how to do it really well. But in terms of what your like the day to day is or what the biggest problems are, we don't know that. And so from that aspect, we have a lot of great advisors and they're listed on our website that have spent their careers in education, to really help direct us, and then ultimately our customers are something that we listen to. But I think the combination of having those strong educational personnel and the strong Silicon Valley tech expertise can create the next generation of that tech software.
So I'm curious to know kind of what makes you take the leap from Microsoft, Netflix, and then kind of enter this education space. What was appealing to you, or what made you want to get into this space? Because it's a little bit different than I would think working at Netflix.
It's very different, and I'm always a little hesitant to kind of mention this, but I've been working on right before I left Netflix, I worked on a project there for 3 years or so, which a lot of people now don't like me for, which
Oh
was
no.
the cat account sharing crackdown.
Oh, you're the reason my mom
I
can't
was
watch
I was really
Netflix,
blind,
man. Oh man,
unfortunately.
Jose.
Yeah. I was a tech lead for that project, and it ended up being extremely successful. There were, yeah, quite a bit of sharing happening, which ultimately was the issue with the business side of the world. Before that, I worked on skip credits and like the rows on the home screen, so everybody loved me. But then I started working on that, and things turned around pretty quickly. But either way, after a large project like that concludes, it's pretty natural to take a step back and wonder what's next. What do I want to work on? And with the introduction of ChatGPT in early 2022, I knew that there was an opportunity to build a lot of new software. And so I started thinking, maybe like I should try taking a shot at this. I know how to build great software, so why not do it for something? And so then I started looking at the different sectors. It was a bit strategic to come into education. My view, and from my experience from talking to a lot of like parents and educators, I don't hear great things about the education software that administrators and parents have to deal with on day to day. And so I think a lot of that tends to come from not having high quality engineers focusing on education technology, and that comes from like this stereotype of there not being a lot of money in education. And so then I started wondering, like, okay, is there a solution here? Is there a way for us to bring some really high quality Silicon Valley tech talent into education in a way that's sustainable and profitable. And so that's a big focus of New Light. So then EdTech kind of became a software. And in terms of our first product, um, that's where we started listening to some of our advisors, right? I reached out to my cousin. She's the vice principal at a school in LAUSD. And I just started asking her, what's your day-to-day problem? Like, what's your biggest issue? And she started telling me about the MTSS framework, multi-tiered systems of support. I'm sure I don't have to explain it very much on this podcast. But she started telling me about all the benefits when it's implemented well. But the problem was that a lot of teachers are a little lost on how to actually execute MTSS framework. There aren't a lot of training days. There's a lot of other expectations that are happening for teachers. And so it just seems kind of overwhelming. And I thought, great, like that seems like an amazing area where AI with an entire product solution can help educators implement this framework that provides a lot of benefits to students in a really effective manner. And so that kind of kicked off the company and our focus.
And I got to tell you, I've been a big user of AI. Like, I'm not ashamed to admit it. I think it's fascinating. I put it to the test. I mean, we were just doing a live training down in Fort Worth, Texas, and was talking about cybersecurity and some AI stuff. And I don't, I was getting a lot of blank looks. And I said, look, I can see a lot of folks don't know what I'm talking about. So we threw it up on the screen, and I just, okay, give me a problem you want to address. And of course, someone, I got a parent that is, past due on their child care bill. How do I tell them in a nice way, but I need the money? So hey, Chat GPT, write me a letter to this parent saying that you're past due on your tuition, and let's make it happen. And then the next one, it's a rainy day and we can't go out to the playground. What can I do to keep the kids entertained for an hour? And Chat
Exactly.
GPT spits out 5 or 6 great ideas and lesson plans and everything else. I mean, it's truly and you got to think, Jose, we're at the point where I guess AI is probably going to be the dumbest it ever is, right? I mean, it's
It's
fascinating.
only getting smarter and it's happening so quickly and it's actually kind of scary. But yeah, there's an interesting balance there and it's definitely the future.
And I assume, and again, I don't, there's probably NDAs and stuff you can't get into, but I'm assuming that, Netflix was using some of this AI like technology for a long time. I'm assuming whenever I finished a show, it'd be like, hey, here's some other shows you may like,
Wow.
kind of
Yeah.
AI esque, right? I mean,
So
algorithms, etc.
there's like a different marketing term for it, which is machine learning. This concept of neural networks and ultimately like that underlying model that powers ChatGPT has existed since I think like the 80s or so. It's been around a
Wow.
long time. What's changed is our hardware has gotten significantly more powerful, and that's allowed for us to construct more complicated models that try to map the brain out a little bit more. And 2 years ago, there was just kind of like a breakthrough where it got big enough training went through it that all of a sudden it really started to sound intelligent. So yeah, Netflix absolutely has machine learning in so many different aspects of how they run that product. But this next generation of AI, it's slightly different, and they're actually still trying to figure out exactly how to put it in. Something that I heard, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but like in the search, if you could just say like, oh, it's Thursday afternoon, I had a tough day, like I'm looking for a comedy or blah 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 blah, right? Like that is now something that can be interpreted and turned into search results where that wasn't really that simple to do just 2 or 3 years ago.
Wow. I mean, you almost think it's not out of the realm of possibility in a few years to just say, gosh, I love Ben Stiller and I love hockey. I'd love to see a movie with Ben Stiller starring as a hockey player. I mean, and then next thing you know, AI creates it and you're watching this original movie. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility, which is why you've seen so many folks on the entertainment side, they're
Yeah.
striking, they're threatening to strike, they're trying to get new contracts, new union agreements, because some of the stuff, and you've certainly seen way more than I have, but wow, it is crazy what they can do with some of this stuff.
Yeah, it was a big focus on the strikes last year. And I think they came up with some good solutions. The good thing is, and the way that I'm kind of viewing all of this is that the execution part of our day-to-days is becoming a lot easier with AI. The
Yeah.
creativity, though, that's still missing. And that's what requires a human element touch in order to move things forward. So for something like content creation, you can get AI to create like a scene, but it's generally going to be kind of bland and generic. That's where you need those writers and directors to really make it something special.
Very true. And you can't totally replace humans because you do need some
Yeah.
judgment and some. I mean, as much as I do use it, it is wrong a lot. And the thing that always kind of makes me wonder is like it says things with such confidence
Yeah.
that you never even think to second guess it. I mean, I don't know if you saw that one, but it came a lot in the legal circles where like a lawyer basically used it to write a brief to the court, and the opposing counsel's reading this like, wow, I've never heard of some of these cases. And it turns out that's because the AI just made them
Yeah.
up. They
Yeah.
didn't even exist, but it was so convincing that like, wow, okay, you fooled me, right?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because if we think about humans, we tend to do the same thing also. Like anybody can say something confidently and knowingly knowing that it's wrong in order to answer something. It does. There are like some strategies that are out there to try to keep it closer to reality, and even just telling it like it's okay if you don't know, like just don't include something that you don't understand. Just even that little instruction can actually make it stay more to the truthful side of the world.
And I think that's the biggest fear as we're creating these new networks to simulate human intelligence essentially. Gosh, you got to be really cognizant of bias and everything else you're introducing into the yeah, you think about Tesla, they've probably got more data because these cars are driving around with 7 or 8 cameras,
Yeah.
millions and millions of miles every day. And it's interesting, if you start having a car behave like we drive, well, then you're not necessarily stopping at every stop sign and you're
Yeah.
rolling through
Which
them. And
driver are you really basing that off of?
right. And the same thing when we think medical side, it'd be great to have, AI as a doc in a box or something, but you look at some of the medical research and you realize, well, boy, this medical research was only done on 100 people and they all lived in the Northeast and they were all old white men and they all did. I mean, it's just the bias suddenly becomes real in that you're
Exactly.
taking as fact something that doesn't apply to a vast majority of the world or the population. So I do get a little concerned about some of the guardrails we are or are not putting on and how that's going to work, I guess, in the future. We want it to learn, we want it to be great. We just don't
Yeah.
want it to be too human so it gets all of our our nasty traits, I guess.
Our approach on it is that it's essentially a symbiotic relationship, right? Like the AI can make recommendations, can make guidelines. We're focusing on personalized student support. So based off of the student data, historical and like what's going on in the MTSS framework and context about the school itself, we make recommendations for intervention strategies. But ultimately, they're recommendations, and it's up to the educators to be the decision makers and decide based off of all of their experience and what they know, right? What actually could work, and then move forward with those paths.
I know a big focus of New Light is just that recognition that look, teachers are strapped, man. There's not a lot of extra time in the day. We love data, uh, but sometimes it gets frustrating because it's like data, 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 data. Where does this all go? What does it all do? What is the point of collecting all this data? And that was kind of one of the things that you were focused on at New Light is actually let's show the value of entering the data so the person inputting the data actually can be like, oh, this was really helpful. I inputted A, B, and C, and now I know X, Y, and Z or whatever have you. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your approach and why that's important to you guys?
100%. So something that I'm kind of seeing in the education space is that there's a lot of focus on starting to make more data-driven decisions. It's kind of interesting because when I joined Microsoft in 2009 and those early 2010s, there was starting to be a philosophy shift on focusing on making more data-driven decisions, similar to what education is going through right now. And so there was a lot of focus initially on data collection, but all of a sudden we had a ton of data and it was like, all right, well, what do we do with it? Like, cool, we have the data. Now what? And so heading into the middle towards late 2010s in my career, that data analysis and turning that into action started to become more and more of a focus. And I think that education will get there as well. Ultimately, I think that maybe we're joining at the perfect time in education because we can bring in some of that experience of turning that data collection and into actionable items. There are a couple things that need to happen in order for that to actually be able to be successful. One, data collection has to happen, has to be simple, and it has to be organized in a central way that can be analyzed. And that's something that Intellitir provides. Making data collection as simple as possible for our teachers, for our educators, so that they can get back to focusing on what's important is extremely important to us. And that's always going to be a focus of ours. The second part is once you do have this data in a very centrally located way, anonymous, of course, making sure that we take care of the privacy of students and everything that's being collected. But once you have it in a central repository, it allows for analysis to take place and to actually figure out what the best forms of action based off of data becomes. So the MTSS framework, I love the MTSS framework. I honestly resonate with it. I have a personal story around it, but from what I've seen, it's built off of a lot of like small studies that have happened in different states, right? And you mentioned biases. That's a concern that I have of like the studies that I've seen. But overall, there's a lot of judgment that goes into it as well. And it has shown beneficial effects on students. Now, what a large data-driven system like this can potentially provide in the future is if we get a lot of this data in one place and we're able to analyze in this specific context with this situation, this student did this thing, what have been the most effective intervention strategies historically through like hundreds of thousands or millions of students, then we can arguably find the most effective intervention strategies and improve on the MTSS framework that's out there today. That's like a long-term goal that I have in mind. I'm not promising that right now. It's the benefits that you end up getting from being able to collect all this data is being able to analyze it and actually figure out objectively what works and what doesn't in which situations.
And I'm not, I'm not in the weeds on this as much as you are. The collection that's taking place nowadays is most of that computer based? Is it paper based? Like how are folks even collecting some of this data nowadays?
A lot of the people that we've talked to, potential customers, BCBAs, teachers, have complained about this part of it. A lot of it seems to be pen and paper,
Okay.
and sometimes it's, if we're lucky, if the teacher actually like collected data on what was happening with the student, right? Sometimes they'll just come in with a summary of what took place. And of course, biases can be introduced in any like part of these steps. And so making sure that you actually collect the data at the time that these events are taking place introduces an objective structure to this. And then by moving things online and away from pen and paper, we make the organization aspect a lot easier. We introduce collaboration features and having anybody that needs access to the data to be able to go in and start looking at it to try to start doing any sort of analysis. So instead of teachers scheduling time with student support teams sometime in the future, and then bringing in some pen and some papers that have the recorded data that they have at that meeting, and then requiring like the student support teams to go through it and analyze it and try to figure out intervention strategies on the dot. Like if they're collecting things inside of Intellitir and they schedule something with the student support team can start analyzing that data ahead of time and be prepared for that meeting so that they have a more effective student support meeting at that time when they actually do meet. I said meet a lot there, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't that be a novel idea to actually have some stuff and prepare ahead of time and maybe not have it all written down where you can't read it my chicken scratch on the paper to begin with, right? And then I'm guessing, along with the data collection, now you've got some real reference points and can actually start mapping out changes and trends and all of that stuff holistically over time, right?
Yeah. And the real beauty of the AI models that we can do today with is we can personalize the intervention strategies to your schools and districts as well and states, right?
Mm.
Like different states have different policies, districts have different policies, schools have different policies. We can provide all of that information to the school, to Intellitir for that school. And so when we're coming up with the intervention strategies, it takes that into account so that it knows what resources are available or what approaches that school tends to take. I have an example. One of our customers is a virtual district. And so we just tell the AI model, hey, this is a virtual school. Whenever it makes an intervention recommendation, it knows that it's a virtual school. So it starts talking about virtual check-in, check-out systems and other things that are specifically made for virtual schools. That's not something that was possible a few years ago, but with this technology, it becomes really, really fascinating.
That's totally fascinating. I love the idea, and I've tried to build some like custom GPTs as they're called to kind of help out and get to know a little bit more about what we're doing better. And it's actually been pretty cool how you can customize it so it has a knowledge base to draw from. I am sure that some people, I'm almost just thinking in my head like, gosh, what are the frequently asked questions that people say, Jose, what about this? What about that? I know privacy probably has to be one of the top ones, right? Like, so how do we? I guess I guess maybe there's an explanation here about if you just go to chatgpt.com today, which
Yeah,
I encourage everybody to do. It's free. Go try it out. Play around with it. But I mean, make no bones about it. Like it is 100% certain that your data is not private. Your data is public. Your data
yep,
is being looked at. Your data is being aggregated. Your data is being used to
exactly.
train new models. So please, dear God, don't go and put your bank account and all this crazy personal stuff in
Yeah,
Chat GPT because that wouldn't be good. So I'm assuming there's some people that have some knowledge of kind of Chat GPT, and now they're saying, well, Jose, if I give you all this data, isn't this going to be all public? And what does the security look like for my data, right?
yeah. Also, don't put personal student information into ChatGPT because
Oh,
it's trainable. Yeah,
FERPA and all the rest, right?
yeah, so we built a FERPA compliant platform that all runs on Microsoft Azure servers. All those servers are in the United States. We don't use any third-party vendors. All of our developers are in-house. All of this is to ensure high quality and that to make sure that we're taking care of all of this data. Even the AI models that we use, a lot of these startups, they kind of wrap OpenAI APIs. That's a little technical, but it generally means that they call ChatGPT from a different website to get the recommendations back. What we've done is we've hosted the models inside of Azure itself, servers that we're in charge of, that we make sure are inside of the United States. And we call those servers internally. So never a third party. Our data never goes to a third party vendor. And of course, the data is not used to train these models at all. That allows us to then provide that for compliance. The other aspect of it is that we understand schools are complicated. And once again, every school and district is different. So we've built a really powerful permission system to give you the power to dictate who can see what data for what students. So you have that control up to the student granularity to be able to make sure that the right people are seeing the right student data.
And I'm assuming when you set this up, you'll normally have kind of an admin or someone can kind of see a lot, and someone that maybe can't see everything, just the clients, the children that they're working with,
Yeah.
those types. So different levels of permissions, different levels of visibility, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so we create as a part of onboarding some default roles. An admin role generally gets everything. We'd like for one person, maybe two, right, to have access to that. And then we have a counselor role and a teacher role. And counselors can, I think by default, see interventions across the board for all students, but they can't see behavior events. And then for teachers, they basically can't see anything to start off. In order to see student data, they have to request access for that specific student. Or ahead of time, as you're going into a school year, you can set up which students belong to that teacher and then give them access to that student information if you feel that's necessary, right? Because you don't necessarily always want to show behavior and emotional data to teachers. It really depends on the school. And that's why it's really important to create this flexibility where the schools and the districts have that power to dictate how the platform works as opposed to us coming in and dictating it ourselves.
Very scalable, very customizable. It sounds like I know on the website you've got a button that says pilot program. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing with the pilot program and what you hope to do, and maybe some of the listeners are eligible or would want to participate in that too?
Yeah, 100%. Contact us, schedule demos. I'm happy to show the platform. Newlight.io is the website. I'm sure we're going to mention that later, but
Yes.
we have two things that you can do. One, we actually have a free version of IntelliTier. In the free version, you get most of the features of IntelliTier. What we do is we create a personal school for one user, and that one user can add in student data. They can talk to the AI assistant, ask for intervention recommendations, and you can try it out, start trying it out. What you don't get access to on that free version is being able to add other users onto that same school. So you kind of lose the collaboration features of it. That's where our pilot program comes in. And so what we're doing right now, and we know that school budgets have like calendars associated with them. And so it's not always easy to purchase software at any given point in time. So the way that we're approaching it is we're allowing you to try it for free, the full version for the current calendar year, for the current school year, with a commitment to pay for the following school year. And then we also allow for you to cancel a month ahead of whenever you have to, like, whenever we would put in that invoice. So July invoice, June cancellation date. You can try it between now and June. And if you don't like it, great, you can cancel. No, don't worry about it. And we stand behind our product, which is why we're offering that as an option. But we believe you're going to fall in love with it. And so we'll move forward with our relationship from there.
I like it. I like free. I mean, you can't beat free. I might as well try it out and test drive it. I mean, crying out loud, they want to charge $120,000 for the Cybertruck. You can't even drive the thing before you buy it. I've never heard of something so crazy, right?
Yeah, and that thing drives in a lot of interesting ways. So I agree. You may want to try test drive that one out first.
So you've actually tested out the drive-by-wire, I'm assuming.
I have a couple. So my old car was drive by wire, which was pretty
Oh,
uh
wow, interesting.
Infinity G37, and
Okay.
then I do have a Tesla that I believe is also drive by wire.
Ah, I haven't got to experience it yet. It's on the list. We just finally started seeing some Cybertrucks running around here in the neighborhood. But I can't afford $120,000 for a truck. I think I'd end up divorced if that was the case.
I think you could get a better truck anyways for a lot
Well,
less.
probably. I'd probably get two trucks for that price, right? But so where is kind of New Light at now, and where do you see it going in the future? You launched this, and forgive me, I'm blanking. You launched it what, 2 years ago? Is that right, or am I off on that?
So we launched Intel Tier this summer as an MVP, and we onboarded a few districts to try it out and start providing us feedback.
Okay.
So us listening to customers, building what you actually need as opposed to what we think will always be like top-notch priority. So as a customer of ours, if you have any suggestions of how we can improve the software, please send it over, and we're very receptive to it. But we brought some on board so that they can start using it and provide us feedback so that we can continue to improve it. And then now we have that full version now. We have these programs that allows people to try it, and we're continuously focusing on improving it and heading into the 25-26 school year. I think the focus will be on growth a little bit more than developing the product.
And the clients that you have now, are the clients that you're kind of going after, are they like single site clients? Are they multi-site big school districts? Are they early childhood program? Like what Head Start programs? Like what kind of mix of programs are you looking
We're
at here?
honestly open to anybody that is looking to execute on the MTSS framework.
Okay.
Uh, our first, so my little like pop quiz of knowledge for our company, once we launched the website, the first district that signed up for our beta program, which is what we launched at that point in time, came from Montana. And so we've onboarded a district in Montana. We have a completely virtual district with tens of thousands of students. And then we have a couple other districts. And so, yeah, we're just getting started now. But so far, there hasn't been anything that has stopped us from being able to onboard anybody.
Well, that's exciting stuff. It's cool to see your gave birth and now watch your baby grow, right? That's very impressive stuff. I know one of the things, if I could pick your brain a little bit, because you got a lot of good expertise. I was reading a study the other day, and this is crazy to me, but one out of every four childcare programs over in the UK, United Kingdom, last year was a victim of cyber attack. Can you believe? I mean, it's crazy, but I guess the criminals a lot of times they don't really care what sector, what industry you're in. They're just looking really to take over and use your computing power. And I'm a little curious if they're maybe targeting early childhood and schools and that, because historically we haven't had the most robust security, and I know some people's passwords are literally password 123 and that kind of stuff. Any thoughts or any kind of suggestions we could have on just really increasing our cybersecurity footprint?
I think there are some great products out there that help with those cybersecurity attacks. Our biggest approach is to use platforms that have proven to allow for us to host software that is safe. And so for us, it's Microsoft Azure. We trust Microsoft quite a bit. They accepted us into the Microsoft for Startups program.
Hmm.
So they're actually helping fund us a lot in computation to be able to deliver this product for everybody. But Azure provides a lot of security measures to be able to protect against that. In terms of like, are they specifically attacking a certain type of software? I don't think so. I think if anything, it's more like they're attacking the infrastructure that's powering that software, and it just happened to be that those ended up on that infrastructure. That would be my guess, because you try to find like now my hacker hat is going on. So
That's
you,
why I wanted to ask you, because you got an interesting insight here. I know, and two-factor authentication has come a heck of a long way, by the way.
you don't actually care about the product itself that like is running on these servers. What you care about is some security hole that's there on the underlying infrastructure that allows you to kind of bypass the product itself and take over what you're looking for.
Hmm.
So the infrastructure and how you're hosting this is very important. The That's personally why I'm so against like us trying to run our own servers and managing all of that. There's just so much maintenance and patchwork that's required to make sure that you're up to date all the time. Instead, we offload that over to Azure for them to manage it, and then we put our product on top of that.
Well, and there must have been a decision point. I mean, you purposely chose to make this a cloud-based product. Can you just talk a little bit about, is cloud-based more secure than something I've got on my laptop or my tablet or my desktop downloaded as a local program? It would seem to be it would, but again, you know way more about it than I do.
I think it depends on the use case, but yes, I think generally that's the case. For software, the software that you get, and I'm sure you've tried great software and you've tried horrible software. Great software, I will say Netflix. I'm just promote that for a second.
You must
But
have left on good terms.
yeah, I did, luckily. I think they want me back, but that's besides the point. uh, the the great software or the terrible software or how safe and secure the software is ultimately depends on the skill set of the engineers that are building it. And so if you take an approach where you have your own server farm and you're managing that and patching everything, you it becomes a little bit of a lottery draw of the people and personnel that you put in charge of that part of your company.
Mm.
But if you have a company, a large company that has, I think at this point, Azure is Microsoft's number one product. Um, so much invested in making sure that they're providing safe environments to host software, then I think you're more likely to get a more secure solution on cloud like that than you would trying to do yourself. But it depends, once again, it depends on the expertise. I'm not personally like a server manager type of engineer, but if I were one of the best in the world, then I would want to take it over because I wouldn't trust Microsoft as much as I would trust my own skills. And so I think that's ultimately what it depends on.
Well, and two, I guess if data is stored locally and heaven forbid we misplace our tablet or our laptop or it gets stolen, it's a little bit easier to kind of grab that data, which I mean, especially some of the data you're talking about. It's serious data. We don't want that just being leaked out to anybody and want to make sure it's secure. So at least having it in the cloud provides that additional level of access control. You can turn that person's access off. You can do all this stuff kind of remotely, right? I mean,
They have the backup solutions. They encrypt the data by default. And so you actually have to actively try to have that stored in a readable fashion. Uh, and so, yeah, you get a lot of these things by default that you might not be thinking about when you're building a product. And instead saying like, oh, how am I going to store this on my database? Or how am I going to manage this? How am I going to back it up? What if my city burns down, right? Like that is something that Microsoft worries about. Like, what if that like an entire, because of a huge earthquake, they lose an entire
Sure.
day. They have solutions to have that data in a different place so that you can continue running the product without having to worry about that. And so I definitely don't want to run multiple server farms at this point in time. And so it just becomes overall easier.
So I know the product has the integrated AI component to it. For folks that may be a little uncomfortable or unsure or just, haven't gotten there yet, I mean, your product, you can still enter all the data. I'm assuming the AI is kind of like a feature you can turn on or turn off or use or not use kind of at your discretion, correct?
Yeah, you can hide it behind the permission system that we have.
And do you
So
feel that most people that are accessing the AI component of your product are those typically administrators or those teachers? Like, who would actually have that AI capability, and what are they? Is it more like reporting kind of based stuff? Like, what exactly are they using that for?
so I think the majority of what I've seen have been from counselors or the student support teams to get those ideas of what intervention strategies to apply.
Okay.
Administrators I've seen be interested in trying to brainstorm like other tier two intervention strategies or tier one intervention strategies that they can apply at their school. And so that's something that we want to also keep better track of or allow you to keep track of, like what intervention one strategies have you actually applied, what tier two strategies do you have available, maybe even scheduling eventually, and to ultimately provide like the most personalized recommendation, right? That's the goal. Um,
Yeah.
so teachers, counselors were the focus. If I think back to my cousin's problem, which was that teachers could have solved some of these intervention questions in the classroom itself, but instead they're referring the students to her office. To me, that sounds like she would like for the teachers to also have access to the chat itself so that they can brainstorm intervention strategies within the classroom itself. And so that there isn't an unnecessary need for referral and for the student to get the support as soon as possible, as opposed to having to go through some waiting period.
And I would think as an administrator, gosh, I'd love some reports to show some data to justify some more positions, quite honestly. Like, look at all the stuff that we're doing. Let me pull some reports and show you like why these positions should be funded, why they should be expanded, what exactly we need. So I mean, I think you're right. Like a lot of what is measured is what is done, right? But unfortunately, we have a lot of that data that we never really look at or never try to correlate or just never really see it again. And I like how you're taking that out and kind of looking at it more holistically to inform not only the efforts of the individual student, but kind of more broader. If we see troubling trends and hey, maybe there's something going on here, maybe we need to do something more, holistically versus just the individual student that's out there.
Yeah, that's ultimately the goal. And as we know, there are benefits with the MTSS framework that students receive: better attendance, better grades, higher graduation rates. If our holy grail is if we show that schools and districts that are using IntelliTier are able to improve those metrics faster than schools that aren't, I think it becomes a really easy conversation moving forward from there.
Well, absolutely. And having that data would be a big step in that direction, as you mentioned. So, really exciting stuff, my friend. If folks want to learn, again, more about the product, if they want to do the demo, if they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to kind of plug into your universe?
Yeah, newlight.io. So NEULIGHT.io. There's a contact us form. I'm looking at every single one of those messages coming through. You can schedule a demo directly. Just schedule with me. I promise. Super friendly. Very happy to do it. We can walk through IntelliTier, and I would love to hear your questions and feedback. Or you could try the free version of IntelliTier, so that you get that personal school that you can't share with anybody else. But we can convert that into a full blown like school version of it as well.
Well, fantastic, my friend. Well, I really appreciate you being on and talking about this cool stuff. I mean, it's a really interesting time we're in. I mean, I didn't ask you how old you are, but I was alive before the internet, and I think about the ways internet has changed my life. I
Yeah.
feel like we're on and cell phones too, by the way.
Yeah.
I feel like we're kind of on the edge of this next big thing that's really going to change my 3-year-old daughter's life and my 9-month-old daughter's life, and really become something that's just integrated into the fabric of our society in the future with this AI. And I applaud you for looking to figure out how we can leverage it now to help minimize some of the workload and enhance some of the reports that we get and some of the data. It's really an exciting time, my friend.
100%. I actually think that what you just referenced is exactly how I think of it. There have been in my lifetime three huge steps in technology, and I think this is the third one. The first one is the introduction of the internet and websites, right? That really changed a lot. It created the dot-com boom in 2000. Then with the introduction of the iPhone and apps, that created another revolution of software and how we go about our day-to-day lives. I think this is the third one. I think this is in line with those two. Just the amount of value that AI is now providing that didn't exist just 3 years ago is tremendous. And because of that, I think a lot of software has to be recreated with deep integration of AI. And that's what we're looking to do. And hopefully we can help out educators as much as possible.
Oh, and I really want to applaud you that you're taking the approach, which I wish more places did. I mean, this is not develop something and then wedge people in and try to fit what we've developed. I applaud you because you're actually trying to say, I don't know this industry as well as the people that are working it every day. Here's what I think we need, but let's make this, really by the industry for the industry. And that's sadly an approach you don't see all that often. So I do really applaud you in taking the feedback you're getting and trying to make this product as useful and as relevant as we possibly can for the end user. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. I really appreciated it. And to everybody out there, I honestly ask you to scream at me. Like, tell me what could be better, what's horrible about what we built. We just want to make it better.
Well, wonderful. Well, Jose, thank you for being so generous with your time today. I really enjoyed having you and having this discussion. I think it's exciting stuff you're in. I mean, we're just on this cusp of this boom, this technology boom, and it's really cool to see somebody looking out for the education sector. Because as you mentioned, it's not an area a lot of people want to wade into, but there's a big need here, and I think you're on the right track to really making a huge difference. So I thank you for that, and I really thank you for being here with us today, and encourage all of you to reach out. You can see he's a friendly guy. He's not going to bite, right?
Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Well, you're very welcome. And I thank you guys for staying with us. We appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. We've got a lot of great guests coming up. I've appreciated those that have written in with your suggestions. And of course, we always like the 5-star reviews. So thank you for those as well. But this is Andy Roszak for the Early Childhood Chats podcast saying thank you very much for being with us. Thank you to Jose for his time and his generosity. And we will see you on the next podcast.